The build you're watching right now is played almost exclusively in Korea, and it's about to hit the other regions because it transforms sorcerers from a B tier comp to an S tier comp. I one tricked it for 46 games, hit challenger, it's uncontested, and even if you do get contested, it's not a reroll composition, meaning that as long as you're able to hit your 2 stars, you can push levels and still perform well. If you're looking to climb to Diamond, Masters, Grandmasters, or even Challenger, keep watching. Let's start by understanding why this particular build and positioning for Taric transforms Sorcs from a B tier comp to an S tier comp. Taric's ability reads, gain a shield for 4 seconds. It redirects 50% of the damage received by adjacent allies. Now the important part here is the ability scaling for the shield, which is 500% at 1 star, 580% at 2 star, 680% at 3 star. That means that your 2-star Taric gains 5.8 points of shield for every ability power that he has. And because Taric is a sorcerer and you play 6 to 8 sorcerers in this comp, he gets 90 to 135 ability power completely for free. That means his shields every time he casts his ability are massive. So how do we increase the effectiveness of those shields? Well, we increase armor and magic resistance. That's where those 2 gargoyles come in. With solo frontlining the Taric, 2 Bastion and 2 Gargoyles, he gets up to around 380 armor and magic resistance, which is close to 80% damage reduction. So that is the first layer of defense, but it does not end there. You also have Redemption, which further increases damage reduction on the Taric. It also heals the Taric. You have Shen, which will shield the Taric. You have Soraka, which will heal the Taric, Swain, and Shen, and also provides Targon, which increases shielding and healing, which is very good in this comp. And then you also have Silco. So when you solo frontline your Taric like this, the enemies will clump around the Taric, which means that Silco will always hit your Taric with Shimmer, which heals the Taric, the Shen, and the Swain. And then also you put Gunblade onto the Silco. So when you combine all of these factors together, your Taric turns into this unkillable machine that will straight up 8-0 other boards in stage 5 sometimes if they don't have enough damage to kill the Taric. You add QSS to the Taric because in the late game, with all of these layers of defense, the only way that your Taric dies is by not casting his ability. And the only way in which he won't cast his ability is if he's CC'd. He can die within the duration of a single Heimer stun, which Heimer will always stun your whole board. He can die in a Jarvan stun. He can die in a Set stun. He can die in a Nautilus stun. And even if he doesn't die in a Nautilus stun, some Nautilus positionings will actually cause the Taric to get pulled away from the Redemption, or will cause other sorts of issues with your frontline. And then finally, Cassante, when you're solo frontlining a unit, will just straight up counter this. So QSS is very, very strong. When you play this comp, you're always going to want to take Pandora's items on 2-1 because there's very specific items that are required to make this comp work. If you're not familiar with how to guarantee Pandora's items on 2-1, real quickly here, go into your League client. To the right of your summoner icon, click on this little icon here, scroll down to Twisted Fate, click on him, then click Equip. That will guarantee that you always get Pandora's items on 2-1. Now, when you play Pandora's items, there are 3 main units that you're looking to itemize: Taric, Swain, and Silco. You've already seen the build for Taric, which is double Gargoyle QSS. On Swain, you're looking to build utility items such as Redemption, Ionic Spark, and Sunfire Cape for anti-heal. And then on Silco, you're looking to build 2 primary items, which is Blue Buff plus Gunblade, and then either anti-heal in the form of Morellonomicon, if you don't have any anti-heal on the Swain, or a damage item in this 3rd slot. So I provided a couple of examples here, such as Giant Slayers, Archangels, Jeweled Gauntlet, as well as Rabadons. So those are the main items that you're looking to build. Now, in terms of the order of priority here, Blue buff is almost always going to come first because a 2-star blue buff carry in the early game is going to kill a lot of units. It can help you win streak, and even if you lose fights, it will help you preserve HP. Your second item can either be an item for that blue buff carry if it's 2-starred. For example, if you have Cassio 2 or Malzahar 2 or even Milio 2, blue buff plus JG is very strong and will kill even more units. Or if you roll these items, or if you have an upgraded frontline unit, you might want to consider building either Gargoyle, Redemption, or Ionic Spark. Usually, I do not build Sunfire Cape until later on in the game because Morellonomicon is quite strong, so worth noting that one in particular. But I have found that Swain's items in the early game tend to be a lot more impactful than Gargoyle, so usually I will find that my secondary item, if it's a frontline item, is either Ionic Spark or Redemption. Now, in terms of order of priority for these items on Taric, Swain, and Silco in particular, you will always want to have double Gargoyle on your Taric. He's just simply not tanky enough with both of them. So QSS is always going to be the last item you build on Taric, and usually will not get built until the start of Stage 5. On Swain, you always want to build Redemption. The delta on Redemption, which is a statistic that measures how effective an item is in a comp, is insane. It is the best delta, I believe, of any item in the entire comp. Of course, I'm sure that assumes that you already have some other items, so it's not really truly the best item in the comp, but it is very, 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 very strong. You do not want to go into Stage 5 without Redemption. So make sure that you have Redemption on your Swain. It makes your Taric a lot less squishy. Ionic Spark, in my humble opinion, is stronger than Shiv because your Swain doesn't tend to die until your Taric dies, and if your Taric dies, you're usually losing the fight anyway. And so Ionic Spark makes your Swain stronger, and it usually does more damage than Shiv. And then lastly here, Sunfire Cape, you need some form of anti-heal. If you cannot put Morellonomicon on Silco, then you need to put Sunfire Cape on Swain. I prefer Sunfire Cape over Morello on Swain because you're second rowing him, he doesn't get attacked as much, and because of that, he does not get as much mana, so Sunfire Cape is much more reliable for spreading anti-heal. And then on Silco, you always want to build blue buff plus Gunblade, but in the early game, if you had to slam blue buff plus JG in order to win streak, you might put yourself in an awkward situation where the only form of anti-heal you have is Morello, and you're going to want to put that on the Silco, so you might end up with a build like blue buff JG Morello. I will say that Silco is a lot worse without Gunblade. So if you have to slam this JG in the early game, you should really be looking to build Sunfire Cape on the Swain so that you can build Gunblade on the Silco later on. I want to note that, very important, because Gunblade on Silco is very strong. I have found that it is much more impactful than most of the other items that you can put on him because it keeps your front line alive for a very long time, and it also keeps your back line alive against anything that provides backline access from the opponent's team. So one thing I want to note there. Lastly, with Pandora's items, if you get a spatula, you want to always build Sorcspat, of course, and the best holder for Sorcspat is going to be Shen. But if you have to put it on a Soraka in the early game, you can. I will note that it is much stronger on Shen because Shen will keep alive Taric and Swain for a very long period of time, much longer than they would by themselves, if you're able to get the Sorcspat onto him. So try to prio that Sorcspat onto Shen. In Stage 1, you have two primary goals. 1, find a blue buff carry for the backline, and 2, find upgraded frontline that can stall for that blue buff carry. What you're looking at here is a full list of every 1 to 3 cost unit you might want to consider holding on to in the early game. I understand that it's overwhelming at first glance, however, I've organized it in such a way that hopefully makes it easy to understand. In the upper left, you're looking at all of the different bruiser frontline options that are available. Renekton and Cho'Gath are very cost effective. Vi generally will only get played if she doesn't cost you Econ, or if you're missing Renekton or Cho'Gath, and then Rek'Sai is very expensive and will generally only get played if she provides Void. In the upper right, you're looking at the different Bastion options that are available. Generally speaking, Bruisers are stronger than Bastions, partially because it's easier to hit Void, partially because the units just generally feel stronger. However, it's always more important to have upgraded frontline than it is for you to have quote-unquote ideal trait frontline. So if the game gives you a lot of Alaois and Poppies, make sure you don't pass up on that. And then obviously the Bastion frontline is quite strong if you have Taric. In the middle here, Swain and Taric, you should always hold on to these units no matter what, because they are fundamentally core to the comp and very strong later on. In the back here, we have all of the different blue buff carries that you can consider. Cassiopeia, Milio, Talia, Vel'Koz, Twisted Fate, and Malzahar. Do not put blue buff on Orianna because it will grief her ability. She will cast it too early, usually end up casting it on a backliner. She doesn't do enough damage. Do not put items on Orianna, basically no matter what. In terms of priority here, I found that Cassiopeia is the strongest blue buff carry. Vel'Koz is very strong as well if you're able to find her early, and then Malzahar 2 is very strong as well. Milio 2 is quite good if you're able to find her before, or him rather, before Cassiopeia, Malzahar, or a Vel'Koz. And then Twisted Fate and Talia usually do not happen that often, so you don't have to worry about those two a whole lot. I think it happened like once or twice in like 40 plus games. So remember, rule of thumb, you're looking for upgraded blue buff carry in the backline and then upgraded frontline to stall for that blue buff carry so that you're able to kill units. And that's it for stage 1. All right, let's talk about stage 2. You have 2 primary goals. 1 is to win, and 2 is to make econ. Yeah, I know, pretty straightforward, but let's be a little bit more specific about what this means in practice. The first decision for stage 2 is whether to level to 4 on 2-1. I'm going to give you a basic framework that hopefully helps you answer this question. If you have no upgrades and no items that you can slam with your components on stage 2-1, you should almost always stay level 3. Why? Because when you stay level 3, you get one more level 3 shop on 2-2, and level 3 shops have the best probability of 1 cost. And if you looked at the stage 1 portion of this guide, there's a lot of different 1 costs that you can find. So on the frontline side of things, you can find Cho'Gath and Renekton, you can find Alawi and Poppy. On the backline side of things, you can find Cassiopeia, Melio, Malzahar, and Orianna. And 2-starring these units can be very impactful. Of course, some of them are more impactful than others, but regardless, if you have no upgrades and no items to slam, you should almost always stay level 3 on 2-1. On the flip side, if you do have an upgraded unit and you do have an item that you can slam with your components, then you should always level on 2-1 to play your strongest board, because you're very likely to win that round. Now, most games are going to fall somewhere between. For example, you might have an upgraded unit, let's say a Cassiopeia 2, but you have no items to slam. Or maybe the item that you can slam is not one that you can put on Cassiopeia. So for example, maybe you have a Sunfire Cape that you can put on your Renekton, but nothing that you can put on your Cassiopeia. Or maybe you have a circumstance where you have an all 1-star board, but the 1-stars are relatively strong. So for example, maybe you have Vel'Koz plus Talia, for example. Now, this would be a very strong board on 2-1, even though it's all 1-stars. So there are a lot of circumstances here in terms of making the decision to level 4, but hopefully that framework helps you understand it. Another factor for playing stage 2 is, let's say that your strongest board is Cho'Gath, Renekton, 2-star Cassiopeia, and a Soraka. And on your bench, you're holding a Malzahar and an Orianna pair. So you have Malzahar pair, Orianna pair on your bench, and this is your board currently. In order to make 10, you have to make one of 3 decisions. Sell the Malzahar pair, sell the Orianna pair, or you can sell Cassiopeia, put the Soraka on your bench, and then play Malzahar and Orianna on your board. In this way, you can keep the Malzahar and Orianna pair, and you still get to hold the Soraka. You know that these 3 units get played in the comp later on, so that might seem like the correct decision. However, it's a lot better for you to play your strongest board than it is for you to hold on to Malzahar and Orianna. Trust me when I say you want to preserve HP in stage 2, so it is incorrect to sell Cassiopeia here, and you should either sell one of your Malzahars, one of your Oriannas, maybe one of both, or maybe just fully sell out of one of the pairs. Just note that Malzahar and Orianna in particular are not worth holding on your bench if they're going to cost you econ, even though they're sorcerers. The units that I will hold no matter what are Taric, Vel'Koz, and Swain. And this is because they are fundamental to the comp later on, and they are units that hold items very well. Whereas Malzahar and Orianna are a lot less impactful, and they are basically trait bots later on. So play your strongest board, and these are the units that you will always hold on to no matter what. On the stage 2 carousel, you have 3 priorities. The highest priority is Spatula, so that you can build Sorcerer Spat. The second priority is Taric or Vel'Koz, as these 2 units are very fundamental to the comp. If you're provided the choice of either or, you should pick whichever one is stronger for your comp in stage 2 right now, or you should pick whichever one has the better component on it. And then lastly, you should pick any unit that has a component on it that allows you to slam an item sooner rather than later. For example, if you have an open tier, you should look for tier on carousel so that you can slam your blue buff on Cassiopeia or whoever your blue buff carry of choice is. On 2-5, you should almost always level to 5 unless your board is extremely weak, all 1-stars, you don't have good items, and you have to play for lose streak. Otherwise, you always want to play to win. Remember, that's one of the goals of this stage is to win, because you're probably going to end up losing some amount of rounds in stage 3 to the multicaster players, to the 1-cost reroll players, and a number of other compositions in this meta that spike in stage 3. So you want to preserve as much HP in stage 2 as possible. So most of the time, you're going to want to level to 5 on 2-5, even if you didn't level to 4 on 2-1. So keep that in mind. All right, we're now in stage 3 and the goal has shifted. In stage 2, our primary goal was to win while making as much gold as possible. In stage 3, our primary goal is to survive while making as much gold as possible. So why the shift in our goal? Well, there are a lot of compositions in this meta that spike in stage 3. Multicaster spikes in stage 3, Cho'Gath reroll spikes in stage 3, Kayle reroll spikes in stage 3, Noxus reroll spikes in stage 3, and Rogue reroll spikes in stage 3. And there's probably some other compositions that I'm forgetting about right now. So it's very unlikely that you're going to win out in stage 3 unless you're high rolling. So the goal here is to kill as many units as possible, preserve as much HP, make as much gold so that we're able to take pressure off of ourselves and spike on 4-1. So in order to do that, we need to have a blue buff carry in the backline that's upgraded at this point, or a Vel'Koz. So if you were not able to find this in stage 2, on 3-2, you're going to level to 6, and you're going to roll until you find one of the many different blue buff carries that I mentioned in the stage 1 portion of this guide, or a Vel'Koz. A Vel'Koz 1 is a perfectly acceptable blue buff carry. It will kill units as long as you have multicaster for it. The lower your elo, the less important it is that you roll deep on 3-2 for this blue buff carry. I played this comp in Grandmaster / Challenger, so the lobbies are very strong in stage 3. The lower your elo, the weaker the lobbies are going to be, and the less you need to roll to stabilize and save HP. So I want to note that one difference here, that this might depend on what elo you're currently in, and you should roll less the lower your elo. Now, what I'm showing here is a level 6 board that is very strong. This is one of the more ideal level 6 boards that you can play. On average, you're not going to have this type of level 6 board. So I'm going to show you a couple of different variations that you can play. I played quite a few of them throughout my 45 different games. So hopefully these different examples that I'm showing on screen gives you an idea of all the different lines that you can potentially take. The main idea is that you need to have a blue buff carry in the back line and some sort of front line that can stall for that blue buff carry so that you can kill units. On the stage 3 carousel, the priorities are roughly the same as they were in stage 2. So the first thing you're looking for is a spatula so that you're able to make a sorcerer spat, which is very strong. Then you're looking for specifically Silco and Shen, which are very strong units. Silco is better than Shen. And then your third priority is any component that allows you to slam an item as soon as possible, or a highest cost unit that allows you to econ up in order to have more gold for your stage 4-1 roll down. So the overall goal for stage 3 is we're looking to survive, we're looking to preserve HP, we're looking to make as much gold so that we're able to survive until stage 4-1, where we are going to spike. Stage 4 is where the magic happens. On 4-1, you're going to level to 7, and most of the time you're going to roll down for ideally this board. Now, of course, this is the perfect level 7 board where you have the Sorc +1, everything fits very nicely. You have 6 Sorcs, 2 Bastion, 2 Invoker, 2 Targon, and it looks very nice. Let's talk about some contingency plans, because most of the games you're not going to have this exact board. If you do not have the Sorc +1, you can still play 6 Sorcs by playing Orianna over the Shen, or if you're a high roller, Ahri instead. If you do have the Sorc +1 but are unable to find Shen, you can play Malzahar, or rather Kassadin, which gives you 3 Void, and then you item hold the Sorc spat on Kassadin until you're able to find Shen. If you're unable to find Silco, in a lot of instances this leads to a bot 4, so I'll start off with that warning, but you can item hold Vel'Koz 2 and play around multicasters. So the way you would do this is you would drop out of these Sorcs here, and you would add some multicasters to your board. So let's add Sona, let's add Talia. And then if you do have this Sorc +1, you would just move this over to Sona, drop this, and play your 4th multicaster. And you would have 4 multicaster, 4 Sorcs, and 2 Targon. And instead of 2 Targon, you could also play Shen instead. If you do not have this Sorc +1 here, you can drop this Shen and play 4 sorcerers, or you can continue to just play the Shen instead. Now, the main issue with this multicaster line is that most of Taric's tankiness comes from the fact that he's playing 6 Sorcs, or that we play 6 Sorcs in this comp. So his shields are very big when you play it the traditional way. When you play it with this multicaster line, yes, you get a lot more backline damage, but your Taric is a lot less tanky. So you're basically playing an inferior version of the multicaster comp that plays Galio frontline or Jarvan frontline. And so you're going to lose to a number of different boards. And again, generally speaking, I have found that if you're unable to find Silco on 4-1, that's a pretty good condition for going bot 4 in a lot of games. When you do your roll down, it's very important as well. I want to note that you hit Taric 2 because He's your main frontline, so make sure that you are not stopping your rolling until you have Taric too. On carousel, you have a couple of different priorities that are similar to the last couple of carousels. You're still looking for Sorc Spat here, even if you already have one in this point in the game. So let me go ahead and switch back to the traditional sorcerer comp that we had. So we have Silco, Malzahar, and Soraka here. So let's say you already have your sorcerer +1. Should you go for another one? The answer is almost always yes, because if you're able to get to level 8, you can play Orianna on your board, or if you're a high roller, Ahri, and then you put the Sorcerer Spat onto Soraka, and you can play the ideal version of this comp, where you get to play 8 Sorcerers, everything fits very well. Of course, this is only if you know that you're going to be able to go level 8. So if you're super low HP and you know you're going to have to donkey on level 7, just stick with 1 Sorc Spat and fit the comp with 6 Sorcs on level 7. So this is mostly about capping your comp. Outside of that, you're going to look for units on carousel like always. So Ahri is very good, Silco is very good, and then Shen is very good. And then outside of this, you can look for components that you need or highest cost in order to make as much gold as possible. On the topic of going fast 8, so if you preserved a lot of HP in stage 2 and 3, there is a world where you might want to consider going to level 8 as quickly as possible. So that's either on 4.2 or 4.5. I have found that generally speaking, if you have a Sorc +1, you should roll on level 7, even if you're high HP and you have a lot of gold, because finding Silco 2 in stage 4 practically guarantees your top 4. So we'll start off with that. If you have a Sorc +1, usually it's correct to roll on 7, unless the only unit that you're rolling for is Silco. If everything else is upgraded, then sure, you can go level 8. But Silco 2 on level 7, when you have a Sorc +1, it can fit this whole board, is very strong. If you don't have the Sorc +1, it becomes a lot more attractive to go fast 8, because then you get to fit this board, still play your 6 Sorc and fit everything else in that you want to fit in. So those are my main thoughts when it comes to fast 8. I have generally regretted going fast 8. I have generally regretted not rolling for Silco 2 before I went to level 8. So I will start off with that little piece of information here. Just keep that in mind that Silco 2 is very important. And by going level 8, a lot of times you're giving up on finding Silco 2 until much later. And Silco 2 is usually a lot more impactful than the additional unit that you get to play. All right, let's talk about stage 5 and beyond. This is all about how to cap your comp. At the start of stage 5 on 5.1, you're going to push to level 8 and you're going to roll for this board. You need to have 2-star Silco at this stage. If you do not have 2-star Silco, you are going to roll to 0 every single turn until you're able to find him. Of course, there are some exceptions to this. If you have a lot of HP, it can maybe sack a few rounds. You might do that. If you have a Vel'Koz 3, then sure, you can carry that. If you have an Ahri that you're carrying instead, you can do that as well. Although one thing I will note is that Silco 2 is better than 1-star Ahri. Now, 2-star Ahri is way, way, way better than 2-star Silco, but 1-star Ahri doesn't do enough damage to one-shot the backline, which often means you're just feeding mana to the backline, and there's a lot of people that are playing Gunblade on their backline, so Ahri 1 is a lot worse than Silco 2, in my humble opinion. So I want to make that one warning here. If you are substituting Ahri as a carry, if you're playing Ahri 1, you may not get good results. Another thing I wanted to make note here is the itemization for Taric, Swain, and Silco. So at the start of stage 5, you're not usually going to be able to have fully itemized Taric, fully itemized Swain, fully itemized Silco, and even start building your items for your secondary carry. So in terms of priority here, QSS is very important starting from stage 5 onward. I have played without QSS a few times, and your Taric can get killed in the duration of a singular stun. If you're playing against Ionia Vanquishers, your Taric can get killed in the duration of a single set stun by Xayah plus Nyla. If you're playing against Nyla Sejuani, you can get killed in the duration of a Nautilus stun or a Jarvan stun. You can get killed in the duration of a Heimer stun. You can get killed, of course, by Cassante. And even if you don't get killed by the Cassante, he'll move your Taric out of position, which is enough to lose the fight. So QSS, very high priority here on Taric, higher priority than getting a third item on Silco. With Swain, you always want to have redemption. This is, again, very high priority. And then you want some form of MR Shred in your comp and some form of anti-heal in your comp. Now, of course, I have both of these items on Swain, but if you rolled a Shiv earlier in the game, that's completely fine. You can use Shiv as your MR Shred. And of course, you can play Morellonomicon on Silco, Vel'Koz, Ahri, whatever, as your form of anti-heal. But you very much want to have some form of MR Shred and some form of anti-heal, because there are certain comps you simply will not beat without these things, especially if they have Dragon Claw on their tank. So I just want to mention this. Very important that you have those things. Outside of that, you're looking to itemize Silco, Vel'Koz, and Ahri with additional carry items. Eventually, you're going to want to duo carry Silco plus Ahri. That is the ultimate endgame. So if you want to see some examples of how to build that endgame, I recommend checking out my match history, because all of the games where you see me top 2, almost always you're playing around Ahri as your ultimate endgame carry. On that topic, there's 2 main options here in terms of how to maximize the strength of your comp moving into stage 6 and onward. Either one, you can roll on level 8 and try to find Ahri there if you're playing around traits. Like, for example, if you have a Sorc +1, you can play for 8 Sorcs on 8, which is quite strong. You just replace the Soraka, and the 8 Sorcs will give your Taric some pretty absurd shields. It'll give your Shen some pretty absurd shields. So even though you lose the Targon value, it's still better to play 8 Sorcs than it is to play 2 Invoker and 2 Targon. If you have a lot of gold and a lot of HP, you can push to level 9. This maximizes the probability that you're going to find RE2. And RE2 is one of the key ways in which you can win games. In fact, if you're able to hit RE2, most of the time you're going to end up winning. So that is the main win condition for the comp. And that really just depends on how much HP you were able to preserve in the early game. And that's it. That's the main way in which you play in the late game. And if you're able to get to this point, you're going to do perfectly fine. Let's briefly talk about positioning, because it's relatively unconventional for this particular comp. You clump your frontline because you want to solo frontline Taric in order to maximize the value from the Gargoyle Stone Plates. You need to have your Swain behind the Taric so that he gets redemption value. And then you want your Shen to be close by as well, so that all of your frontline is clumped and gets hit by the Silco Shimmer. So no matter what you do, as long as you position like this, your Silco will have nearly 100% uptime with his Shimmer on the entirety of your front line. That goes a very long way towards keeping them alive. Because your front line is fully clumped, you also have to clump your back line. Now, you may think it's a little weird that Orianna is here instead of here. There's a very specific reason for that. If a player is playing a lot of frontline units, so for example, if you're playing against a bruiser composition with, let's say, Cho'Gath on the side here, Renekton, Vi, Rek'Sai, Sejuani, and Sion, this Cho'Gath, if you position the Orianna here, can actually wrap all the way to the back and kill the Orianna, then kill your Malzahar, then kill your Vel'Koz, then kill your Ahri, and never interact with your front line at all. So part of why you move the Orianna or the Malzahar here to this position is that in doing so, usually the Cho'Gath will end up somewhere around here or here, and maybe he'll kill your Malzahar and your Vel'Koz. Well, honestly, you would actually move your Orianna here. So maybe he'll kill your Malzahar and Orianna, but he'll eventually get stuck on the Swain, and your Ahri and Silco will remain protected. So the main reason that we only go 4 units deep from the right side of the board is so that you do not get wrapped from the left side here from people that are playing a lot of melee units. Another thing I'd like to briefly talk about is matchup specific positioning. So when you play against rogues, you usually position your carry in this left cubby here, and then you have some bait units in the middle of the back row. And this way they don't jump onto your Silco and he's nice and safe and he kills everything. The problem is this is a lot weaker against all of your other matchups. So what I found is better to do instead, if you have a rogue player in your pool, is position a unit in this third row in front of your Silco. This prevents the path that the rogues have towards being able to jump directly onto your Silco. Of course, the Malzahar dies quite quickly, and that means that the next unit that's going to get attacked is your Silco. And I have had my Silco die that way. But another thing you can do is swap your Swain with Shen. Now, normally I like having Swain on the outside here because he attracts more attention. He spreads his Sunfire to more units. He hits Ionic with more units. But In the rogue specific matchup, if you swap him over to here and the rogues jump to here or maybe jump to here, there's a chance that they will path over to the Swain instead of your Silco, and your Silco will be the last one alive. Sometimes that's not enough. You can still lose the matchup because they have a lot of burst damage from the rogue bleed, but regardless, I have found that this positioning is relatively strong. Another matchup that you might want to position specifically for is the Ionia Vanquisher matchup. So the main thing of note here is that if they're playing Xayah in the opposite corner of where you're playing your team, her ability is going to cleave your entire team, which can cause some pretty major issues. So against Ionia Vanquisher specifically, I recommend splitting up your backline. And what you can do is something like this, where you put your Ahri in one corner, Silco in the other corner, and then group up your 3 Sorcs in the middle, and then move your frontline clump somewhere around here. Now, this is not as strong against other matchups, so I usually just prefer to sack the Ionia Vanquisher matchup if you have multiple different people in your pool, because your Silco is not guaranteed to ult your frontline anymore, and that is a big decrease in the strength of the comp. However, this does make it so that their Xayah is no longer hitting your corner carries nearly as often, which can go quite a long way. It also usually decreases the cleave that the Xayah has even on your front line as well. Don't really know the math or understand why that happens, but yeah, sometimes in this specific positioning, I have found that the Xayah is able to kill the Swain relatively easily, whereas moving one to the left makes it a lot more likely that your Swain stays alive. So this is something you can do in the late game when you're playing against Ionia Vanquishers. This last part of the video is going to be a quick speed run through a bunch of different things that people asked for in my last guide. So that's preference for portals, augments, radiant items, support items, and Ornn artifacts. Let's start off with portals here. So first of all, this is my preference, so do not take this as law in terms of what's best for the comp. In S tier, I have a bunch of item-based portals, so that's Aaron Mount, Thresh's Sanctum, Shuriman Bazaar, and Finn's Market. Also, House Light Shield is pretty good because it's a stall comp. You just put the crown on Silco. He's always the last one alive anyway, so it's pretty good there. Dreaming Pool is good because it guarantees you Silco plus Ahri. Yuumi Zoom Zone is good because it helps you scale plus all the rerollers like multicasters and all the one-cost rerollers. Cardinal Arcology is good because it guarantees Silver Pandoras. And then Ishakan gives you a bunch of items, which again is very good for this comp. I'm going to skip past A tier, B tier, and C tier. This is mostly just my preference. And then in D tier here, the reason I don't like Noxcria is because it forces you to position in a certain way to maximize the value of the portal. And this particular comp does not like spreading in terms of positioning. So you really like clumping in one particular area. And if those different hexes are not in that area from Noxcria, you unfortunately lose out some value from the portal. The other portal, of course, that is in D tier is still Waterhold. This is a Pandora's Items comp. So you need augments in order to take Pandora's items. So yeah, pretty important. Next up, we have augments here. So this is a bunch of different augments that I've taken that I've liked. That said, this is not based on any stats-based analysis. It's very difficult to do that because the sample size for this comp or this specific build for Taric is relatively small right now. So hopefully this becomes more meta and you're going to get a lot more information about what are the best augments. But these are some of the options that I like as of right now. Next up, we have Ornn artifacts. So we have Anima Visage and Eternal Winter. These are both items that can go onto Taric. I have tested out Eternal Winter in particular, and it is very strong with Double Gargoyle. It basically griefs the enemy's team for the entire duration of the fight. And then DFG and Zhonya's is pretty strong on Silco. Next up, we have different Radiant items. So this is relevant if you get Prismatic Pandoras. These are different things that you can consider holding on to. So GS, very good on Silco. Absolution, good on Swain. Stoneplate, good on Taric. Hextech Lifeblade, very good on Silco. Covalent Spark, good on Swain. Willbreaker, good on Silco. Sunfire Cape on Swain. Morello Nomicon, I think this is actually the best Radiant in the entire comp, so that's relevant if you are on Hearth Home. I believe this is very, very good on Silco. And then you can go QSS, Radiant QSS on Taric, although if you roll this in stage 2, you're probably not supposed to keep it. And then lastly here, we have different support items. So Needlessly Big Gem is probably the most broken support item. This is a stall comp. You get a free Ascension with this, very strong, plus you get a bunch of gold. Chalice is good because you line up all of your backline. Same thing with Zeke's. Randuin's is good because you can throw it on either Shen or the Swain and get a lot of value on your Taric. And then Banshee's Veil is quite good on your Vel'Koz so that you can make your Ahri and Silco CC immune in the backline, because when you clump, they're going to get hit by Scions, they're going to get hit by Jarvans, and so on and so forth, so as well as Heimer, so getting CC immunity can be pretty valuable. And that's it for my overall preferences for a bunch of things that people asked for in my last guide, and that's it for the overall Taric, Korean Taric Sorc guide with this unique double gargoyle build. I hope you enjoyed this guide. If you did enjoy this guide, I hope you'll like the video and subscribe and maybe come back for some future guides as well. I stream regularly on Twitch. You can find the link probably in the pinned comment below. It's also in the description of this video. Same name, GM Blue. And I'll see you next time.